Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News for this Tuesday, the 13th day of August, 2024. And our top story, there was no attack on Israel today, either from Hezbollah or Iran. Now, the reason is, we are told, that it was supposedly a fear of an immediate U.S. counterstrike that stopped the attack. Joe Biden then said no attack would happen. In fact, it could be completely held off if a Gaza ceasefire deal is reached. And guess who he's going to pressure to reach the deal? Now, here's the question. Is there a law forbidding Jews to pray on the Temple Mount? Many people think there is. We'll talk about that. And finally, our fourth headline. If you haven't heard this story, guess what a Washington Post reporter asked Biden's spokesman? You're not going to believe it. Well, maybe you will. All right, let's look at the headlines. Headline number one, after all this anticipation, fear, and buildup, U.S. buildup and fear of immediate counterstrikes stay Iran and Hezbollah's hand, is the headline. Here's the analysis. The Shiite axis remains determined to launch a reprisal, but they're hesitating due to threat of a swift counterattack. The U.S. and Israel are prepared for any scenario, but aim to avoid a regional conflict. And at the same time, Washington seeks a hostage deal and a ceasefire. All right. Iran's Revolutionary Guards and Hezbollah in Lebanon appear to have decided on a plan for a retaliatory strike against Israel. Here's the but they're delaying its execution for strategic and operational issues. The delay, we are told, is due in part to the close surveillance and readiness of the Israeli Defense Force to launch a counterattack against any aggression from Iran or Hezbollah. Recent overflights by the Israeli Air Force jets above Beirut aim not only to intimidate Lebanese residents, but also to exploit Israel's aerial superiority and maintain constant surveillance for any preparations for an attack on Israel. The skies over Lebanon and western Syria are densely populated with armed aircraft and drones, ready to strike within minutes if a missile launcher is detected. While drones and Grad rockets are relatively easy to conceal, the heavier missiles that require preparation for launch, particularly those that are powered by liquid fuel, are more easily detected by Israel's advanced monitoring systems. So here's the key. If Israel detects a missile being prepared for launch, and these are one of these advanced ones now, the real precise ones, it can promptly engage it day or night using advanced sensors provided by both the U.S. and Israel. Now, in Lebanon, maintaining armed surveillance and quickly closing the loop to thwart a retaliatory strike is relatively straightforward, relying on available aircraft and basic intelligence on potential target locations Hezbollah might use for attack. In Iran, however, maintaining continuous surveillance and responding within minutes of detecting attack preparations is a bit more challenging. So that's where we're at on this. Israeli and American satellites can capture detailed images of suspected sites in Iran, particularly long-range ballistic missiles. Now, here's another interesting fact. Prior information is not required. Iran's missiles, such as the Shahab-3 family, require an hour to prepare for launch, including fueling, making them detectable by satellite surveillance. The real challenge is maintaining tight surveillance and readiness to intercept an attack, which requires significant resources, aircraft, and a robust air defense system on standby in Israel and on U.S. Navy ships. Iran and Hezbollah understand two key points. Israel and the U.S. will not preemptively strike to prevent retaliation due to Washington's efforts to avoid igniting a regional war, but they will likely act to minimize losses and damage from any retaliatory attack through a counterstrike by the blue side. That is, Israel and the U.S. will do this, possibly even during the attack itself. So in other words, they won't do a preemptive strike, neither Washington nor Israel. They're not going to do it. In fact, we've talked about this. Israel has been told by Biden, you're not going to do a preemptive strike, but you can do a counterstrike, and that's what we're getting ready for. So evidently what's going on is the U.S. and Israel are so prepared with their overflights in Beirut, with their satellite, watching of every moment that's everything taking place in Iran, that seemingly Iran and Hezbollah are afraid to launch an attack because the counterstrike would hit immediately and basically negate anything that the surprise attack would do because they are ready for the so-called surprise attack. So Is this really why there was no attack today? Were they really afraid of a reprisal? That's a fair question. We'll see our next headline. There's another possibility what's going on here. Headline number two, Biden says Iran could hold back on an attack if a Gaza deal is reached. Now, instead of Blinken was supposed to, remember, come to the Middle East, that trip there. Well, he's not going to make it. Biden is sending a couple lower level surrogates there to talk with Israel. Okay, Iran is expected to skip a retaliatory strike on Israel if a Gaza ceasefire deal is reached. U.S. President Joe Biden told reporters in New Orleans on Tuesday, he said he stressed this is my expectation. However, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant left nothing to chance, stating in northern Israel that the IDF is prepared for defensive and offensive actions against Hezbollah and Iran, even as the United States pinned its hope on averting a regional war on Thursday's hostage talks in Doha. A hostage and Gaza ceasefire agreement would more broadly create conditions for diplomacy to get the region out of this cycle of violence. This is from the U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesman Vedant Patel telling reporters today, Tuesday, in Washington. Three senior Iranian officials told Reuters that only a ceasefire deal in Gaza would hold back Iran from direct retaliation against Israel for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran 2 weeks ago. Israel, of course, has not claimed responsibility for the attack, but it's widely presumed they had carried it out. Now, Hezbollah, of course, is also seeking retaliation for the assassination, which Israel did take, credit for, of one of their senior commanders, Fuad Shakur, there in Lebanon. A senior Iranian security official said Iran, along with its allies such as Hezbollah, would launch a direct attack if the Gaza talks fail or it perceives Israel is dragging out negotiations. Sources did not say how long Iran would allow for talks to progress before responding. Now, Iran has been involved in intense dialogue with Western countries and the United States in recent days on ways to calibrate retaliation, and the sources who all spoke on conditions of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the matter. So this is where we're at right now. They're working round the clock trying to de-escalate. Now, what's interesting here is when I read this story, I had a thought of what's really going on here. And someone, as always, in one of the comments on this story, I think this is from the Jerusalem Post, maybe it's Israel National News, listen to what they said. The Democrats want to use this as an excuse to pressure Israel to a deal that only benefits Hamas. The world should only put pressure on Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Israel's the one that was attacked. Instead, they pressure the victim. And that's exactly what's going on. And that was my thought, too. Why they're not attacking is maybe they're not planning on attacking. Maybe they're just bluffing. So there will be some forced ceasefire deal that will be to Israel's detriment. Because remember, if Hamas has its way, the deal that they will sign on to, and this is why they're not going to the meeting on Thursday, is that the deal they said, well, we agreed to, what was it, last July 2nd, something like that. And the deal was made by Egypt, Qatar, and Hamas, and supposedly the United States, but not Israel. And that would leave Hamas still in charge. It would talk about immediately the rebuilding of Gaza. All Israel Defense Force troops would get out of Gaza instantaneously. The hostages would be in piecemeal be released, how many there are still left. And then we'd go on our merry way. And basically that would mean Hamas has won a tremendous victory, won the war here. And so it's likely and it's possible, and here's my thought, we'll see what happens, is that they're bluffing right now, both Iran and Hezbollah, about attacking Israel because they know they're going to get slaughtered when the response comes. But they're going to keep threatening this and say it's going to be this day or that day to get Biden to pressure Israel to say, no, look, we don't want a regional war. That's the last thing we want. These people are really serious about doing it. What we need to do is have you make an agreement, a ceasefire agreement, so we can get the hostages home. We can stop the fighting, stop the killing, do all the humanitarian stuff there in Gaza, et cetera, et cetera. And so, believe me, there's going to be pressure on Netanyahu from Joe Biden and others saying, you got to make a deal. You have to make a hostage deal. And if they make a deal like what Iran is asking for and what Hamas is asking for, basically Israel would lose, and all those lives that were lost would be wasted of the soldiers. and there would be no really justice for those who were murdered there on October 7th. But we'll see what happens. But this is seemingly what's going on because they can still use the threat. They're using the threat every day. And let's understand something else. This is costing Israel a fortune. There's no tourism that's going on. There's no flights now that are coming into the country. For basically every airline has stopped flying people in and out of Israel. So Israel's just, literally stuck, and they're losing, millions of dollars daily because of this. And Iran knows this, Hezbollah knows this, Hamas knows this, and they're playing up to the fact that they can try and stretch this out as long as possible. We've said this a number of times. This has always been the idea that Hamas has had, Sinwar has had, as well as Iran. Let's just stretch this thing out, because the longer it stretches out, the worse it gets for Israel. And so we'll see. All right, let's move to headline number 3. We talked about the important story of the praying on the Temple Mount and the worship on the Temple Mount. And today, as it's over now in Israel, this 9th of Av, and there was no attack, but it's the day when the Jews recognized twice in their history a temple was destroyed. First, Solomon's temple. Second, the temple that was built after the return of the Jews from exile, the one that Jesus went to. That the second temple was destroyed in AD 70. On both days, we are told it happened on the same day, both times, on the 9th of Av. And that's why they remember this day, and they recognize it as a day of repentance, of reflection, and the such like. And there was all sorts of, signs pointing to this would be the day that Iran and Hezbollah would attack, and they did not. But we mentioned the fact that Ben-Gvir and others, about 1,600 Jews, went up to the Temple Mount on Tisha B'Av to pray, to ask God for, help, support, and not let this happen again. And of course, many of them would pray to build a third temple. But the question is, well, is there a law prohibiting the Jews from praying on the Temple Mount? Now, this is interesting. Haaretz, that is a very leftist, far left Israeli newspaper. One of the writers, Josh Brainer, writes about a law forbidding Jews from praying on the Temple Mount. And the minister of Knesset, the man named Rothman, said, please refer your followers and me to the law. Exactly where is the law? Okay, here's the story from Israel National News. After Jewish worshipers ascended on the Temple Mount on Tuesday morning, Haaretz journalist Josh Briner wrote that the police are afraid to enforce the law. These days, we're witnessing the actual collapse of the police force when senior police commanders are afraid to uphold the law in order to sweet-talk Ben-Gvir. Briner also wrote, many people are sending them out and in breach of the law and the status quo are praying and prostrating themselves. The police are not really doing their job there. MK Simcha Rothman responded in surprise. Can you refer your followers and me to the law that prohibits Jews from praying and prostrating on the Temple Mount? The name of the law and the section numbers would be helpful. Correspondent from the Globe's Idon Eretz wrote, of all the accusations we can blame Ben-Gvir for, this is by far the least serious. Here we are dealing with simple religious freedom. Muslims pray in their own way on the Temple Mount, and Jews are also permitted to do so. He added, there is enough to blame Ben-Gvir for the loss of personal security, for the police's impotence in breaking this and that, and the demonstration at Bet Laid. This is a populist approach, but that's absolutely fine. But the problem is there is no law. There's none whatsoever that prohibits prayer on the Temple Mount. And someone said, I would be shocked to find out if there is such a Nuremberg-style clause in the Israeli law book, and there is not. What it is basically a gentleman's agreement in 1967 when Moshe Dayan gave the authority of the Temple Mount back to Islam. Remember 1967, the Temple Mount was liberated for the first time in like 1900 years. The Jews were excited that we're going to build a third temple now. We've got the mount in our hands. And 10 days later, Dayan met with the Muslim High Command, the Waqf, they're called, and gave the authority of the control over the mount back to Islam. But supposedly the Jews were supposed to be able to freely worship there anywhere in Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount. Well, that never happened. And so what happened was the status quo they would argue about, which was from the 19th century, basically saying this is an Islamic holy site, that they're the ones who are the custodians. The Jews can look at it from afar, but really can't pray there. They would disturb the status quo. And this is some of the lousy arguments that are used. And so there's nothing in law that says they can't. And so this is just the tradition that's there. But if anybody tries to pray on the Temple Mount, they will, you can get arrested. We've had stories of this. Remember a couple years ago, there was a bride and a groom. They just got married, and the first thing they did, they went up to the Temple Mount out to celebrate their wedding. And someone saw the bride move her lips. Didn't hear anything out loud, actually just was moving her lips on the Temple Mount. And guess what? She was arrested for praying on the Temple Mount, not breaking any law, for just praying and, breaking the status quo. So no, there isn't. And so again, the temple will be built. We talked about this today. Again, check our book, The Jews, Jerusalem, and the Coming Temple, on our website, Educating Our World, as well as number 8 on our 25 signs. We're near the end. Preparations are being made to build the third temple right now from our website, Educating Our World. Free download, and please take advantage of it. All right, this last one here is, I have no words for this. And my headline is, have they ever heard of free speech? This is a breaking story. You might have seen the video. A Washington Post reporter attempted to get the White House to step in and block Elon Musk's upcoming interview with Donald Trump. He said, I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue, it's an American issue. What role does the president have? Any sort of stopping that or stopping the spread of that or intervening? Now, this is during the question and answer time with, Biden's spokesperson. And so the reporter actually asked the question before the interview with, Trump had with Elon Musk. Is there any chance we could stop it and block it? Because, this is misinformation on Twitter. It's an American issue, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, the writer of this tweet said, these people are some sickos. Before anybody can be admitted to the White House press room, they should understand what the First Amendment actually means, freedom of speech. And we find out that altogether, Elon Musk said today, 1 million people listen live, but with all the repeats and that, over 1 billion people with a B heard part of the interview with Donald Trump that Elon Musk did yesterday on X, formerly Twitter. And they tried to stop it ahead of time. That is, the leftist Washington Post stopped free speech because they don't want Donald Trump being, his message being broadcast. And by the way, Elon Musk said he invited Kamala Harris on to do an interview too. He'd love to have her on to talk about the issues. And of course, she declined because she's not talking to anybody, not doing any interviews, not doing any press conferences, not doing basically anything, instead of doing all these rallies in front of cameras and have everybody talk about how wonderful she is and how she is, this blazing the new frontier, a new type of candidate, and you're not voting for Donald Trump if you vote for her, and that's kind of been the message so far. Anyway, so here we are. It's been an interesting day, hasn't it? No bombings, no attacks, and maybe there won't be. We don't know. But Biden, again, is going to pressure. Here's the takeaway from this. Pressure Netanyahu. You got to make some deal. You have to make some type of ceasefire deal. Enough is enough. And if he doesn't, there could be legitimate threats from the Biden administration of withholding, well, whatever Israel might need. So we'll really we'll stay tuned and keep this ongoing story, at the forefront here, because this is a developing story and it's very, very problematic. So we'll see what happens. And please pray for this situation too. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thank you as always so much for watching. And until next time, as we always say at the end, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.